Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 639, Your Victory Over Denial, Part 2. How acceptance prevents you from denying any facet of the Father's will. The podcast objectives are: reveal how the Ruach of Self works to prevent the merger of wills, analyze the bridge between acceptance and understanding, reveal why many never transition from acceptance to understanding, and reveal the key to your victory over denial and self reliance. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcast or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. Why there is no such thing as a partial merger. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 640 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we laid the foundation for understanding how the Ruach of acceptance defeats the spirit of denial. Along these lines, the sum of the increase and growth you will have made by the time you reach the spiritual plane of acceptance will ensure that all your battles with denial are fought on an even playing field. This is key, for denial is designed to reinstate one of the most powerful strongholds of lawlessness within your mind. Enter self-reliance. Here is why this is such a huge issue at this juncture. Self-reliance is the key to establishing self-rule. And if a framework for self-rule is established to any degree, it will be difficult for you to perceive that you are, to some degree, relying on yourself. Now, here lies the problem. To wit, you will never accept the will of Elohim if the Ruach of self has any standing in your mind or your heart. As I say, he or she does not need to be the governor of your thoughts or your intentions. Quite the contrary, all he or she needs is a seat at the table. All he or she is looking for is an opening. All he or she wants is a hand in your thought and decision-making processes. Here is why. All your thoughts flow into your personal congress, where you decide within your heart if you will act upon any given thought. And as you have learned, if you decide to act upon a thought, an intention will be formed. And from that point, all you will need is an opportunity, and you will act upon the thought which you intended, for it is now your will. Now, here is where the Ruach of Self has the power to ensure that your will is not aligned with the Father's will. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. The prime objective of wisdom and knowledge is to merge your will with the will of Elohim, for this is the only way that no one can snatch you out of his hand. For one of the primary attributes of his will is security. Knowing this, the Ruach of Self works to prevent this merger from happening by attempting to resurrect the Ruach of despair and distrust. Along these lines, the Ruach of Self will work to influence you into making the biggest mistake you could make at this juncture. That is the miscalculation that there is a chance that Yahuwah will not do what you want him to do, or he will not do it when you want him to do it. Now, there are obvious red flags in this postulation, and they all lead to one disastrous conclusion. Vis-a-vis, the one who holds on to these sentiments will not merge their will with the will of Elohim in full. Rather, they will attempt to complete a partial merger. Here lies the problem. There is no such thing as a partial merger when it comes to the will of Elohim. As the saying goes, you are either all in or you're all out. And the Ruach of Self is determined to ensure that you are all out. Here is why. By preventing you from executing a full merger with the will of Elohim, the Ruach of Self is creating a scenario where A, you will be snatched out of the Father's hand, or B, you will be deceived into taking yourself out of his hand. Now, even though this scenario is being conducted by the spirit of self-reliance and a shadow government being run by the Ruach of Self, you must appreciate how the scope of this subterfuge is being driven by the spirit of denial. Ergo, the only way to avoid this scenario is by operating in the power of acceptance, for it is the only power that can eliminate denial. And today, I will show you how. Let's get started. He is only interested in your submission. Now, first things first, I would like to use our scripture passage from Monday's podcast to guide us in the evolution of this critical series of battles between acceptance, i.e., the critical degree of knowledge, and denial, i.e., the critical degree of ignorance. That said, I would ask you to pause the video and take a few minutes to review John 10:24 through 29. Now, as we said in Monday's podcast, the point of no departure within the progression of life is confirmed by the fact that no one can snatch us out of the Father's hand. However, it is possible for the enemy to deceive you into removing yourself from the Father's hand. In this scenario, no one is snatching you out of his hand. Quite the contrary. You, my friend, are taking yourself out of his hand by your own free will. Now, that said, the question of the hour is quite simply this: why would anyone at this juncture take themselves out of the Father's will, knowing that his will is the only safe space in all the earth? Now, before answering this question, I want to restate how we are only considering men and women who have ascended to the spiritual plane of knowledge and are on the doorstep of unlocking the power of acceptance. Now, this is crucial, for there are many pretenders who forsake Yahuwah's will because they were never truly committed. However, the men and women we are considering in this scenario are true contenders, all of whom have unlocked the fear of Elohim. And thus, I ask again, why would any true contender be deceived into forsaking the will of Elohim? The answer is sure, and it has to deal with the merger that is about to take place. Remember, the will of Elohim is never congruent to your will at the outset, and thus the following is true. Although the degrees of faith, obedience, virtue, and the fear of Elohim are designed to position you to merge your will with the will of Elohim. Completing this merger is one of the most difficult things you will ever do, for you will be forced to accept every frame of Yahuwah's will for you. Now, here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, Yahuwah's will for you is not what you think it is. My dear friends, remember what I told you about understanding and acceptance. To wit, the masses have never truly accepted the Father's will because they have never truly understood it. As I say, they may have some conceptual knowledge of his will, but they are void of the procedural. That is to say, they understand the Father's will at a high level, but they are ignorant of the details. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, the devil is in the details. To wit, the enemy manipulates the details to create dissonance between your will and the Father's will. Here is how. The enemy will deceive you into filling in the blanks as it pertains to the procedure of Yahuwah's will. In doing so, you are creating your own will. To wit, Yahuwah told you he would do something, and then you decided it was your place to determine how he would do it and when. Here lies the problem. To wit, Yahuwah will never give you spiritual license to dictate his will. Quite the contrary, he will give you the opportunity to submit to his will so that you can receive his will, so that you can execute his will. Now, that said, you must appreciate that the details belong to Elohim. And unless he asks you for your opinion, he is not interested in your opinion. As I say, he is only interested in your submission. And if you have obtained the fear of Elohim, this should not be a big issue. Remember, The prime objective of the fear of Elohim is to submit your will to the Father's will. For where there is no submission, there can be no merger. Now, if you consider this scenario carefully, then you can see how we have reached the heart of the matter and the great dilemma of succeeding this interval in your quest. Even if you have unlocked the fear of Elohim and you are wearing the girdle of truth, to wit, the bridge between understanding and acceptance is a final proving grounds to determine if you have truly submitted your will to the will of Elohim. And the primary deterrent to succeeding this interval is denial. Let's talk about it. Why many never make the transition. Now, it should be clear that you have let go of various facets of your will from the beginning of your quest until now. However, it is also clear that you have more than likely held on to those things you don't want to concede. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, the goal of the entire exercise of acceptance is to confirm that there is nothing in your life that you are unwilling to concede to the Most High Elohim. This is why I aforementioned that Yahuwah's will is not what you think it is. Now, let me tell you something. Yahuwah's will is to examine every facet of your being and to determine if there is anything that would prevent you from fulfilling your purpose in his kingdom. It really is that simple. Along these lines, if there is anything standing in between you and the fulfillment of Yahuwah's will, rest assured the Ruach of Elohim will make it plain to you. And as you would expect, this is where denial will come onto the scene hard and fast. Now, as I say, the spirit of denial will incite you to deny the will of Elohim in favor of your own will, under the premise that you are adhering to Yahuwah's will in concept. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, Yahuwah's will is not limited to concept. To wit, Yahuwah is not only interested in what you did, quite the contrary. He is also interested in how you did it and why you did it. To wit, two key facets of his will that you would have obtained via understanding. Here lies the problem. To wit, understanding results in convictions, and these convictions form the bridge that connects understanding and acceptance. Here lies the inflection, which I will offer as a revelation. This is one I advise you to bookmark and to share. The primary reason why many never make the transition from understanding to acceptance is because they never generate convictions. To wit, they understand how Yahuwah wants them to perform his will, and they understand why. But they are not convicted to follow the path they know is right. And this is why they will incur spiritual blindness. For blindness is the curse upon all who resist the light. Why many are halted in the middle of the battle. Now, these things being what they surely are, it should be clear that denial is the force that prevents you from generating convictions. To wit, it is the gap that prevents the bridge between understanding and acceptance from being formed. That said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: how can denial pull off this power play if you are going to battle on an even playing field? The answer is sure. Vis-a-vis, you conceded the even playing field. And if you're wondering how, I will tell you with the following revelation. This is one I advise you to bookmark and never forget. The primary manner in which men and women forfeit the power of an even playing field in spiritual battle is by pausing during the battle. Now, in the case of your battles between acceptance and denial, you would halt at some facet of Yahuwah's will. My dear friends, I'll say it again. Yahuwah's will is not what you think it is. Look here. Even if you understand his will in concept, you will never truly understand the analysis, the procedure, or the timing of his will. If you did, then there would be no need for you to have faith. Here lies the problem. Faith is the foundation of all things spiritual. Not only this, but without faith, it is impossible to please Elohim. And thus, we conclude any scenario that eliminates our faith in Elohim can in no wise be a facet of his will, which proves my prior assertions. Vis-a-vis, we are in most cases blind to the factors of analysis, procedure, and time. Now, if you got that, get this. Due to our persistent knowledge gap regarding the will of Elohim, there will be constant intervals in this quest where we come to realize that Yahuwah's will is more difficult than we ever thought it could be. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, your transformation into the spiritual image and likeness of Yahushua Messiah is the most painful spiritual process known to man. As I have told you before, it is like unto surgery of the spiritual variety. To wit, 80 spiritual surgeries in which Yahuwah, by his Holy Spirit, purges you by intense fire to ensure that you become a finished product in Yahushua Messiah. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, many are not prepared to endure every trial by fire. They may have succeeded some trials or one, but they don't have what it takes to succeed them all or none. And we are at the interval where we are to find out what all these fiery trials are all about. Now, this speaks to why many are halted during their battle with denial. To wit, they didn't know what to expect, and so they are struggling to accept. And here is where things fall apart. Get this. When you pause in a spiritual battle, you open the door for complacency to get involved. For you have lost your sense of urgency and your resolve. My dear friends, here lies another problem. Vis-a-vis, complacency is the one degree of lawlessness that opens you up to all the others. And I have told you this before, and now I am telling you what this means for you at this interval. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. If you continue in complacency, this foul spirit will work to infect you with one single degree of lawlessness. Enter amorality. In doing so, two devastating things will occur. One, amorality will corrupt your spiritual value system. And two, amorality will deceive you into broadening the scope of the will of Elohim to include the matters you don't want to concede. Now, there are many points I would like to make about this revelation, but for the sake of high time, I will only make two. First and foremost, if your spiritual value system is compromised, trust me, you will be DIW, i.e., dead in the water. As I say, you cannot progress your quest if you fail to upgrade your spiritual value system on a consistent basis. Not only this, but the only way you can consistently upgrade your spiritual value system is by accepting the will of Elohim. My dear friends, it's a catch 22, and it is right where the enemy wants you. To wit, you cannot upgrade your spiritual values without acceptance, and you cannot operate in acceptance without upgrading your spiritual values. Catch 22. Now, this brings me to point number two, vis-a-vis, if you pause in the battle long enough, you will eventually lose sight of the will of Elohim. And this is how many remove themselves from the Father's hand. It's because amorality has deceived you into broadening the scope of his will for your life. Ergo, those who halt in their battles with denial will take themselves out of the Father's hand without realizing that they have taken themselves out of the Father's hand. Now, here again, we are not considering false Hebrews, petty fools, and the common ruck. Quite the contrary, these battles are being lost by true contenders who are being deceived into denying the will of Elohim. And the only way you will succeed is by accepting Yahuwah's will so that you are never halted in the middle of the battle. And when you feel the spirit of conviction, embrace it. For where there are no convictions, there can be no acceptance. And the man who fails to accept Yahuwah's will is doomed to deny his will. And the man who denies his will is a man who will be denied entrance into the eternal kingdom of heaven. This is the path to defeating the spirit of denial so you can receive the will of Elohim. Set your heart on these matters, take counsel, and speak your minds. Now, here is the final word. A date is set for your trial when you operate in denial. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, we are analyzing one of the most critical intervals in this quest, and I truly hope you are seeing it. To wit, the masses claim to be in the Father's will, even though they choose to deny it. For the way into life is straight and narrow and hard pressed, and they do not want to try it. Heretofore, I recommend never forget that the will of Elohim is never equal to your will in the beginning. And so expect the unexpected, and you will find the secret place of the Most High Elohim. For your sacrifice will ensure that you are protected. Selah. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 639, Your Victory Over Denial, Part 2. And the next podcast is entitled Greater Works You Shall Do, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Friday, April 3rd, 2026. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.